A woman buys a parrot from a pet store, but the store owner warns her, this parrot used to live in a house of ill repute, so he might say some inappropriate things. The woman takes the parrot home, and as soon as she uncovers the cage, the parrot says, "New house, new madam." She laughs it off, thinking it's harmless. Later, her daughters come home from school, and the parrot says, "New girls, new madam." Before the woman can react, her husband walks in, and the parrot says, "Hey, Dave. Long time no see."
A taxi driver picks up a nun. As they're driving, the nun notices the driver keeps glancing at her. Finally, she says, "Is there something on your mind?" The driver hesitates and says, "Well, I've always had this fantasy of kissing a nun." The nun says, "Well, let me ask you 2 questions. Are you single, and are you Catholic?" The driver says, "Yes to both." The nun says, "Pull over." Then, the driver pulls over, and the nun gives him a big kiss. As they start driving again, the driver breaks down and says, "I lied. I'm married, and I'm not Catholic." The nun replies, "That's okay. My name is Kevin, and I'm on my way to a costume party."
A man finds a gorilla in his backyard tree and calls animal control. A man from the service shows up with a stick, a pair of handcuffs, and a chihuahua. The homeowner asks, "What's the plan?" The animal control guy says, "I'll climb the tree and poke the gorilla with the stick until it falls down. When it does, the chihuahua will bite its ankles, distracting it long enough for me to cuff it." The homeowner asks, "What are the handcuffs for?" "Those are for the gorilla." The guy says, "What if something goes wrong?" The homeowner asks, "If I fall out of the tree?" The animal control guy says, "You use the stick to hit the chihuahua." A pilot is flying over the ocean when his engine fails. He radios for help and the air traffic controller says, "Okay, don't panic. Do you see that island below you?" "Yes," says the pilot. "Good. That's a desert island where a shipwrecked millionaire lives. He will give you all the food and water you need to survive." "That's great," the pilot says. "How long will it take for someone to rescue me?" "Oh, no one's coming to rescue you," the controller says. He's still waiting for someone to rescue him.
A priest decides to skip church one Sunday to play golf. He hits a perfect shot and gets a hole-in-one. St. Peter turns to God and asks, "Why would you reward him for skipping church?" God smiles and says, "Who's he going to tell?"
A man goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, I think I'm shrinking." The doctor replies, "Well, you'll just have to be a little patient." An elderly couple is at the doctor's office for a checkup. The doctor tells them to write things down so they won't forget. That night, the wife asks, "Could you get me a bowl of ice cream?" The husband says, "Sure. Don't you want to write it down?" She asks, "Nah, I'll remember." He says, "I'd also like some strawberries on top." "Got it. And some whipped cream." "No problem." 20 minutes later, the husband returns with a plate of bacon and eggs. The wife looks at it and says, "You forgot the toast."
A man is flying a hot air balloon but gets lost. He sees a woman on the ground and shouts, "Where am I?" She replies, "You're in a hot air balloon, 30 feet above the ground. You must be an engineer." The man says, "How did you know?" She asks, "Because your answer, while technically correct, is completely useless." She shouts back, "You must be in management." "How did you know?" he asks, "Because you don't know where you are or where you're going. But now you think it's my fault."
A kangaroo keeps escaping from the zoo, and the zookeeper is puzzled. Each time, they reinforce the fence, but the kangaroo gets out. Finally, the zookeeper asks, "How high do we need to make the fence?" The kangaroo says, "Doesn't matter. You keep leaving the gate unlocked."
A man goes into a bar with his dog and says, "My dog can talk. If he speaks, will you give me a free drink?" The bartender agrees. The man asks the dog, "What's on top of a house?" The dog says, "Roof." "What's the outside of a tree called a bark?" "Who's the greatest baseball player ever?" "Or Ruth." The bartender throws them out on the sidewalk. the dog turns to the man and says, "Should I have said DiMaggio?"
A dog walks into a barber shop, hops onto the chair, and says, "I'd like a haircut." The barber, shocked, says, "Wow." A talking dog, the dog replies, "Yeah, it's been rough lately." Get it? Rough? The barber laughs and asks, "What do you do for a living?" The dog says, "I'm in construction. I'm a roofer."
A man checks into a hotel and sees a parrot in the lobby. The parrot squawks, "Hey, ugly." The man is shocked and complains to the hotel manager, who apologizes and assures him it won't happen again. The next day, the parrot squawks again, "Hey, ugly." Furious, the man complains, and the manager scolds the parrot. On the third day, the parrot squawks, "Hey." The man glares at it, and the parrot says, "You know what?"
A fisherman catches a golden fish, and the fish says, "If you let me go, I'll grant you one wish." The fisherman says, "Okay, I want my wife to love me as much as my dog does." Poof. He goes home, and his wife jumps up and down in excitement, licks his face, and barks at the door.
Two men in a rowboat are fishing, and one catches a huge fish. They row back to shore, and the fisherman says, "We need to mark the spot so we can come back here tomorrow." The other man grabs a marker and draws an X on the side of the boat. The fisherman says, "Are you stupid? What if we don't get the same boat tomorrow?"
A magician is performing on a cruise ship, and the captain's parrot keeps ruining his tricks. Every time the magician does a trick, the parrot squawks, "It's up his sleeve. It's in his hat." One day, the ship sinks, and the magician and the parrot end up on a lifeboat together. After a few days, the parrot looks at the magician and says, "Okay, I give up." "What did you do with the ship?"
A lawyer is driving through the countryside when he hits a pig. Worried about what to do, he stops at the nearest farmhouse and tells the farmer. The farmer says, "No problem. Just give the pig a proper burial." "I'm a lawyer, not a farmer." "How do I bury a pig?" the lawyer asks. The farmer replies, "Simple. You just need to dig a hole, say a few words, and throw in some legal jargon." The lawyer says, "Legal jargon? Like what?" The farmer says, "Oh, something like case closed or next of kin notified." A man finds a genie and is granted 3 wishes. His first wish is for $1 billion. His second wish is for a mansion. The genie says, "What's your third wish?" The man thinks for a moment and says, "I wish I could be irresistible to women." Poof. The man turns into a giant chocolate bar.
A teacher asks her students, "Which animal is the smartest?" One student says, "A fox, because it's cunning." Another student says, "A dolphin, because it can communicate." Little Johnny raises his hand and says, "The smartest animal is a chicken." The teacher asks, "Why do you think that?" Johnny replies, "Because we eat them before they can outsmart us."
Two cows are standing in a field when a flying saucer lands nearby. A little green alien gets out, walks up to the cows, and says, "Take me to your leader." One cow looks at the other and says, "I told you those crop circles were a bad idea."
A scientist is conducting an experiment with a frog. He cuts off one leg and says, "Jump, frog, jump." The frog jumps. He cuts off a second leg and says, "Jump, frog, jump." The frog jumps again. He cuts off the third leg and says, "Jump, frog, jump." The frog still manages to jump. Finally, he cuts off the fourth leg and says, "Jump, frog, jump." The frog doesn't move. The scientist writes in his notebook, "After removing all legs, the frog loses its hearing."
A man walks into a bar and sees a horse sitting at a table, drinking a beer. Stunned, he approaches the horse and says, "Wow! A talking horse. What are you doing here?" The horse looks up and replies, I just finished a hard day's work at the farm and needed to unwind. The man, still amazed, says, you should be famous. Why don't you go on TV or get a movie deal? The horse takes a sip of his beer and says, why? They'd probably just make me the butt of the jokes.